Howdy amateurs, and welcome to a new video. I haven't made a video in a while because I just haven't, I got busy with other things, and I'll explain it more at another time, but I think I'm going to change the direction of my channel, go a little bit more of a blog thing where I just talk about things I'm interested in at the time, and occasionally doing a project style video of my videos before, just because they take a lot of time and they're not good for me. But today, I'm excited to share with you Manjaro Linux. So I'm still a beginner. This isn't a video where I want to teach you what I've done here, but I want to show it off. So as a brief explanation of this is, if you're familiar with, I'm going to assume you know nothing about computers. Well, here I've taken my PC and dual booted it and added a second operating system. So there's the Windows that a lot of people are familiar with. I've installed a second operating system because I can. There's a bunch of positives for it, but if you're not that into computers, then you're not going to care. Some things you're not even going to notice, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I had to get technical, I had to learn a lot, and I'm in love with how it's set up. This allows me to have a little bit more freedom with things, so I'm enjoying it a lot. So, to kind of start from the beginning, this is an operating system. Windows is operating system, and an operating system, I'm going to butcher it, but at its smallest bit, operating system is just software that lets your PC handle all of it's a program that helps to get you to all the smaller programs so you can actually do things. So you're not typing in code to open up, Minecraft. You can go and click on an icon, It's something that, we get so used to, but computers don't do that naturally. So your operating system does that for you. And I'm not going to make an argument of why you should do what I've done, because there's a bajillion different ways to set up an operating system on your PC. But I will tell you some of the things that I've liked about this. So one of the first things I'll point out is I've dual booted my system, which means I still have Windows. I'm not going to reset it because it would turn off my screen thing, but I can go to a part of I can reset my computer, hit a couple buttons, and go back to my Windows that I'm used to if I need it, because this is Linux. It's open source, it's really good, a lot of things support it, but there's just some things I think I will always need to go back to Windows for, so it's there, and I have a lot of space on my PC, so it's not bothering me right now. But yeah, I'm not going to try to get too technical. I'll try to keep this interesting for people who may not know a lot about PCs. So I guess if I draw attention to my desktop here, it's, I find this very appealing. Obviously it's a wallpaper. It's this, for those of you who are interested, this is specifically Manjaro Linux. You have the little Manjaro symbol and the cat, and with the cyan eyes, I love this cat, it's so pretty. But, with this, some things that I'm super in love with, with Linux so far is you have more, you can do a lot more, creatively, and this is just, basic to some advanced Linux users. This is a basic thing, but, besides the wallpaper, obviously you have these little widgets, analog clock. This is a little binary clock. If you don't know what binary is, that's okay. This is a clock, and it's just fun to watch the little lights, I don't know if I have ADHD, but this is definitely something that would trigger it, and you can just watch it forever, tick around. These are just two things that I hardly look at, but it just tells me, on my desktop without opening another application like I'd have to do in Windows, storage devices and use of my GPU and CPU in just a really pretty way. Something else that I've started to like is this up here. one of the biggest things I didn't like about Windows is the desktop icons. And while technically you can have none and just pin a bunch at the bottom of your screen, you know, you couldn't do that with Windows in a way that I preferred. But down here, it still shows me, you know, applications I have going. But up here is where I started to store all of the applications I use a lot. You know, if I have an application that I don't have up here, then I would just launch it from my Windows button thing. But like, just so clean, you know, it's a lot of empty space that I might go and utilize with other widgets and stuff later. But like, I'm so glad I'm not looking at desktop icons, which it's nitpicky. Some of you are going to go, dude, why? You know, it's so nitpicky. But this whole setup here is very satisfying to me. So, and there's a bunch of uses, cool things about doing this that I'm not going to be able to get to just because I've gotten used to it already. But you know, if you're just used to Windows or you're just used to Mac OS, you might notice that, you know, up here is different. To me, this just makes way more sense than the symbols that they used before. Like, it works the same. You have applications, you can move them around. You can turn off those lines. I turn them on because it kind of shows me, oh, I can do it, you know, do something in corner, you know, corner half the screen. You can do that in Windows, but this just makes more sense to me here. Which you might have noticed is something that it did something weird like that. So something that I didn't know you could do with Windows until I saw it here is they made it a lot easier to have a second desktop, to where it's like if I have work going on one and I can have play going on another, you know, this just makes more sense. Well, there's a way to do that on Windows with some keys. You can set it up to where you can have multiple things going on. The fact that I can click or move tabs back and forth just makes sense. And it's a feature that I didn't even know was on Windows, which I'm kind of sad. And as you can tell, you know, I have Chrome going, or Chromium for Linux, which it's made to work with this operating system. You know, I've got other stuff going on. So I'm not thinking of anything else to show off at the moment about the operating system, except, well, I have more widgets down here that I forgot to mention. I have a fuzzy clock, as it's called, where it just says, you know, 25 to 8, as if, you know, people hardly talk like that anymore. But with this one, it's funny because you can make it super fuzzy to where it's like, it's Monday, so it's the start of the week, which I think is funny, but it's less useful, so I keep it at the more accurate version. But, you know, and then just, you know, lock, power, and restart and sleep, you know, which is cool. And something I want to mention with what I noticed with the sleeping, with this operating system, when it handles sleep, how Windows would sleep, and it might be a setting that I just wasn't aware of, but my Windows sleeps and it keeps all the lights on my PC. So, you know, I don't want to turn off my PC every time I go to sleep, but, you know, I put my Windows to sleep and it would still keep a lot of the lights on in my, you know, box and then light up the room. But here I put it to sleep and it turns off all the lights inside the box, which it's convenient that it's doing that for me. But, you know, just another small thing. And, you know, they're going to add up. I'm going to learn more about how this all works and implement it to be more useful for me. I'll have more gadgets going. But for now, I'm pretty happy with it. So, if you don't want to know anything more about how all this works, here's a good time to stop. But from this point for the rest of the video, I'm going to try to explain a little bit more about how all of this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my hard drives manager, or my partition manager. It's partition manager. Boop. All right. So if you go into Windows and you can look up, you know, disk manager, you can find an application that looks something like this, that brings you all the storage devices on your hard drive, and it shows you how you've cut them up and used to save them. You know, even if you're not going to do this, it's something good to know. You know, instead of just handling your 2 terabyte hard drive as one large 2 terabyte hard drive, you can tell to cut it up into smaller bits. Like if you want a chunk, you know, for here, I cut it up into smaller chunks to use for the operating system. You might want to cut it up in chunks. If someone else uses your PC, like if you're sharing it with someone, you want your files to be completely separate. You know, that's something you can do where you tell your computer to treat your hard drive as if it's separate hard drives. You know, you're smart, you can figure out different ways that's useful. But so I have 3 different hard drives in my computer, like a 500 gig SSD and then two 2 terabyte hard drives, which, yes, that's a lot of space that I may never fill. But it means I don't have to worry about getting another hard drive at any point. So with the 500 gig one, I have my Windows in it, which because my Windows is in it, it's not going to pop up the Windows stuff on here because the 2 operating systems aren't going to work that nice, aren't going to work together like that. But you can see that this is supposed to be you can see like it's supposed to be like a 500 gig-ish device, and it's been cut up into smaller chunks to be used for Windows. You know, here, Windows. So the Windows operating system itself is on one of these chunks, and there's a second chunk it uses to work with it, and the rest of it is empty for use for the rest of the PC. I have a chunk that what is this? One of these is, so this one is this one I had before, where all of my games are on it. It's a large file, whatever. But I'll bring your attention to this one, where you can see there's smaller chunks here that I've used to cut up. So what you do when you, I'll preface with, if you want to do this to your PC, you do not, again, I'm not going through all the small details, go to other videos. This is me just introducing you to the idea. You don't need a new hard drive if you want to do this to a computer. I see people doing it to old laptops, getting these other like if you have an old rundown laptop, you know, if you're give it to someone who's tech savvy and they can download this other smaller operating systems, and it'll run so much better on a smaller operating system, you know. But I just got another hard drive because it's easier. But with these cutting up, you can take another drive and cut it up to use, you know, to download an operating system on. But just on this new one, because I'm kind of starting from scratch, you know, I want this new operating system to be my main one, so I'm slowly downloading all the applications I had before that I had on Windows, like re-downloading them, which kind of sucks, but it's just better for the long run. But it's cut up in smaller ways. So I mean, I keep saying it over and over, but I literally if you follow a tutorial, it tells you to cut it up into smaller chunks to download. So how a PC handles an operating system is the most basic lines of code that comes on your motherboard when it starts up scans your hard drives looking for an operating system. And what it does is I can't show you without like recording my screen potato, and that's gross, so I'm not going to do that. But if you go into the BIOS of your computer, which you usually do by resetting it, spamming delete, it'll show you a list of all the possible storage devices, and it will tell you which ones has operating systems on it, and you can tell it to boot from specific places. And that is very useful to know if you're going to build a PC one day, because when you build a PC, there isn't an operating system on it, and you have to download one on there anyways. So what I had to do when I downloaded Windows, and what I had to do when I installed this new one, was get a different device and get a USB and download the files that it needed to do so onto a USB, and then tell my PC to boot from a USB to then download onto my hard drive. And that sounds complicated, It's easier than it sounds, I promise. Again, this isn't a tutorial video, I'm just talking about this process for me. So I actually had a little bit of trouble because I had some trouble as, because there's a learning curve here. I had to learn how all this worked. But some funny things I had problems with was when I first, loaded up, the operating system was fresh, the original background was there's like nothing on it. I was like excited, but it wouldn't read my Wi-Fi card. And I spent several days on the internet looking for, Manjaro isn't picking up my specific Wi-Fi card. What's the problem? And without my PC being able to connect to the internet, I couldn't download new applications, which was frustrating. So my workaround was getting a little dealio that let me connect my PC to my laptop using an Ethernet connection. And this is just a little dongle that connects Ethernet to a laptop, or specifically specifically a USB-C, which my laptop has, and that's how I had to use my Wi-Fi card for 2 days. And my fix was updating the kernel of my operating system. If you don't know what a kernel is, I don't completely understand myself. The way I have kind of come to understand it, which might be wrong, is just like if you're playing, Minecraft, and you want to go onto someone else's server, you don't have to go to whoever's hosting the server and connect your PC straight to it to play on that server. You can play wirelessly. And what I've kind of come to understand is the people who make these operating systems have live kernels that your PC like downloads and installs and works from, almost like it could be like iOS. Like if you're familiar with iPhone, it has different iOSs like 11, 12, 13 or whatever. And what can be done on a 13 can't always be done on a 12 or vice versa. So I had to in a sense update the iOS version or the Manjaro version on my PC, and so the one I updated to was the one that got my Wi-Fi to work. But I was dumb when I did this the first time, is I went into the bit that lets me, update the kernel. So I went in here and added, so when I installed this, I had, Linux 5.10 and I downloaded the new kernel, but I didn't install it. And then I deleted the current kernel and then restarted the PC. So there wasn't a kernel on the Manjaro. So it's like, my PC's like, oh, Manjaro is here, but Manjaro's like, but I'm not here. So I had to completely redo the whole process because I was dumb and clicked buttons and didn't do anything correct, did things wrong. And I might come back later and install these newer instances, but as that's as experimental, and with anything, I don't want to mess with that yet. But that was funny. I had to completely re-download Manjaro for a second time, and it was like, oh, not very fun. And my other big issue was switching back and forth. While I always knew how to do it, I wanted to create an easier way to do it. And I've kind of given up on that because I'm not switching back and forth between the two as much as I thought I would. There's most except 2 or 3 things that I was used to in Windows actually works on Linux here, so I'm not going back and forth as much as I could. But I spent a lot of time trying to set it up to where if I restarted my computer, it would automatically ask if I wanted to go to either one, and I could choose, but I really have to go back into my BIOS right now and click buttons. So it takes a little bit more time, but not enough for me to continue to spend the hours that I've already spent working with it. And I'm pretty sure that's all I wanted to talk about, you know. It's clean and it's new. I can do more to it, you know, and I can choose, if I wanted to, I could choose other Linux distributions that are even more bare bone, that I can have even more ability to mess with it. Like I could go and choose color schemes and stuff, but I can just personalize this more than I can do Windows, which is cool. I had to learn a lot about computers to do this. So if you're not willing to learn about computers and stuff, I don't recommend this. But if you're interested in all of it, like this process taught me so much about PCs. You know, I'm actually, for those of you who know me personally, I'm changing my minor to computer science. You know, I've recently gotten to code and stuff, and I'll make YouTube videos about that later. You know, stuff that I believe it's cool to talk about when the time comes. But like, it's taught me so much and it's been super interesting, and that's another cool thing I've done. And if you talk to like some diehard Linux people, they can give you a list, and you can go to other YouTubers and they can give you lists of reasons why Linux is better than Windows. But for me so far, it's been fun to do. It's a bit more personalized, things run a little bit more better. You know, the way I can set this up is just, it feels better to me. And so my verdict is, you know, if you're interested in PCs and computer stuff, and you have some time and some patience, and you just want to learn more about it, this is a fun thing to me, and I've enjoyed the crap out of doing it. And you know, let this be the start of a rabbit hole. And a lot of time you're willing to spend. A joke in the Linux community is, yes, Linux is free, depending on how much your time is worth. Because if you're Bill Gates or whatever, whoever, some person makes a lot of money and you make $100 a second, you know, the time you spend on this might not be worth it. But I spent a lot of free time doing this, and it's been worth it to me. So, but that was really dumb. I don't know why I said that, but I'll leave it in the video for people to laugh at me for. But, you know, back to talking on my YouTube channel. Back to talking with my YouTube channel is, I think I'm going to make more videos this style with more interesting visual content. I know you stared at my desktop for way too long. My apologies. I'll have more interesting videos later. But I think I am going to go to more talking videos rather than me cutting up a bunch of stuff and writing scripts, because that takes a lot of time and I can't do that consistently, and I'd like to make more videos without it taking as much time as it did before. So I have more Minecraft content that I would like to do, that I'm excited to do, which is cool for me. And like I said a couple minutes ago, I've gotten into coding, so if I make a project that I'd like to talk about, I'm going to make a video on it. So I've had a lot of fun. So thanks and gig 'em. Have a good day, amateurs.